Hello, medicine family. My name is Eris Corinthian Betancourt. I'm 33 years old. I'm from Aurora, Colorado, and I work with plant medicine. When I say plant medicine, I mean psychoactive, psychedelic, mind-altering, soul-improving medicines. I have sat with ayahuasca in Iquitos, Peru, under the guidance of Hamilton Souther, Christian Gearhart, and Alberto Torres in 2019 for 5 ceremonies. I have gone to Utah to sit with the Agua Native American Church for a peyote ceremony. I have sat for 8 ketamine infusions with Rocky Mountain Mind and Body. I have returned to South America, back to Iquitos, Peru, to work with Selva Howard, Don Howard's daughter, at Spirit Quest for 3 Huachuma ceremonies. And I just returned from Villa Garzon, Putumayo, Colombia, to work with Sean Chester and the Taitas of the Siona tribe with the native guides for 3 Yagé Colombian ayahuasca ceremonies. And I've also done a lot of independent work outside of traveling and ceremony. I did an extensive 2-year every single day stint of, I'm going to use the term microdosing, but the doses weren't micro. I would say they were medium dose, perceptual threshold doses of substances that I won't list, but the 2 that usually people microdose. I'm not saying them for legal reasons, but consecutively every single day for 2 years, both substances, first thing in the morning, purely as an experiment, just to gauge. And while I'm touching on that topic, what I got from that was a lot of preemptive housekeeping that I was able to do with myself that helped a lot when I showed up for ceremony to do bigger work. There wasn't a lot of heavy lifting, so to speak, to do, which made the ceremony run a lot smoother because I had done a lot of that work on myself initially and before I showed up. This is going to be kind of a riff slash, I have a handful of these pointer cards because there are certain points that I don't want to accidentally omit from this testimony. Let's see, why I make these testimonials. I make these videos to bring attention to the medicine. What I've noticed when I interact with people day to day is that this is not a common topic. It is niche unless you are inside of the medicine community. And once you're inside the medicine community, obviously a lot of those same conversations, they get repetitive, but outside of that community, people are extremely ignorant, or they're just uneducated to no fault of their own, or they're misled by propaganda or false information that floats around. And I seek to do these things and do the work myself so that I may come to the table and advocate in an educational way, and I try to leave bias at the door and answer a lot of the repetitive questions that come up, but also a lot of the questions that don't get answered that I don't see other people who talk about these medicines, they don't discuss these things. And I like to try to bridge that gap for people. I also like to advocate for reputable centers. There are a lot of retreat centers, there are a lot of places that are popping up now because it is becoming trendy. The law is opening up, allowing more people to, start their own healing process, but wherever there's something good, there's a lot of bad that follows right behind it, and a lot of that is profit driven. And there are a lot of people who intentionally or unintentionally malpractice. By that I mean people who serve the medicine who are not qualified and should not be serving the medicine, who will either inadvertently put people in danger or at risk for making their condition worse, or who are actively and maliciously trying to gain money or power from people at their expense by putting them into situations that involve these plant medicines. Now, my personal experience, I'll start with ayahuasca because this testimony is going to be purely on my experience with the native guides. My experience with ayahuasca was my first plant medicine ceremony encounter. And I went to Blue Morpho, like I said, under Hamilton Souther, Christian Gearhart, and Alberto Torres. And it is a extremely reputable center. It is potentially the best place that you can go for ayahuasca. It is Peruvian Shipibo tradition based. And I say that because what I have found with my experience now with the native guides is when I went to Colombia, they call it Yagé. And I was under the impression that Yagé was different than ayahuasca. It wasn't just a name, that might have been a different brew. I discovered that's not the case. As stated by the shamans at Blue Morpho, and as stated by Sean, the liaison and main guide for the native guides in Colombia, the brew is exactly the same. The Psychotria viridis and the ayahuasca vine are the only ingredients in the tea. No third-party plants, no additional additives by the taitas or shamans. That's it. The brew is the same. The cooking process may be different because I did notice some differences in the volume and potency of the two brews, as well as the taste, and my experience through ceremony. Because the Peruvian Shipibo ceremony under Blue Morpho was as follows. We drank from shot glasses. There were minuscule amounts in the shot glasses. It didn't take much for you to be blasted off completely into ceremony and be quite overwhelmed with the experience. With the native guides, the brew was not as bad tasting. It went down smoother. It was greater in volume. We had larger cups that were filled with more volume of the tea itself. So, in addition to that, with the native guides, I noticed a less chaotic impact from the medicine, which initially I thought was not a good thing. My initial response to the potency of the medicine at the native guides was, this isn't that strong. And because I had only one experience with Blue Morpho and only 5 ayahuasca ceremonies under my belt, my only basis for comparison was that if ayahuasca doesn't throw you through the wall, it must not be good ayahuasca. And what I had to learn was that, there's more than one way to learn or deal with things besides being thrown through a wall. And actually, it might be beneficial to not be thrown through a wall. Now, also, for my first ayahuasca experience, when I showed up, I had a lot of emotional and personal baggage. I was, 4 years younger. I had gotten out of a terrible, awful, toxic relationship. I was not the greatest human being. I had done much less housekeeping for myself, psychologically, mentally, and emotionally. And I showed up with a lot of fear and anxiety, and the brew was much stronger, and I had no idea what to expect. And I got my ass handed to me. I got lit up every single night. And what that did was, it was so harrowing that it forced an evolution of my brain, of my person. There was no way that I could leave Blue Morpho having been the exact same person as I was coming in. I was force changed. it was the most terrifying and horrific and profound, and at the very end, beautiful experience I had ever, the closest thing to divinity I've ever touched. But the walk through that was treacherous. The reward afterwards was, I'd never been that genuinely happy in my life. It did something for me. It worked. And I was extremely grateful. With the native guides, my experience is very different. The ceremonies are a little longer. They start later in the evening. They go later into the morning. The instruments, the music is different. The first half of ceremony is in silence. There are almost time sequences for cups if you want them. They had guitars, they played drums, they had the shikapas, the rattle leaves, they had actual rattles, they played harmonica. I didn't think that instruments past singing and shikapas and rattles and buffalo drum were even used in ayahuasca ceremonies. That's something that I did learn, was that different tribes, Shipibo, Siona, those are the only two that I've worked with, but there are many tribes spread across Ecuador, Brazil, Peru, Colombia, and all these different tribes have different either brews, ingredients, potency, cooking methods, instruments, duration of ceremony. They do all kinds of different things. So ayahuasca is not always one thing. That's, again, like some things that you won't hear from other people, but that are very factual and that you can run into. So I like to let people know that if you're going to go do ayahuasca, it actually matters what kind of ayahuasca you're going to go do. Because the comparison between native guides and Blue Morpho, for me, if somebody, or let's say if multiple people were to come up to me and say, hey, I really want to go do ayahuasca, where should I go do this? I would tell some people, hey, you should go to the native guides. And I'm saying that because I know what that person's personality is like, and I have a better idea of what I think would help them versus hurt them or not be as helpful. To some of the other people that might ask me, I might say, hey, you need to go to Blue Morpho because this experience is what is probably going to help you most. And I like being able to do that. I like being able to point people in the right way or in the right direction. So, with the native guides, at the very end of my 3 ceremonies, I don't feel as radically changed as I did leaving Blue Morpho, but what I do feel is much more learned, much more educated. Like I said, I wasn't showing up to do a bunch of upheaval. I wasn't showing up to do a bunch of personal traumatic treatment or soul surgery. I genuinely wanted to learn. I wanted to change a little bit. I wanted to grow. I wanted to learn. I wanted to use the word train. When I was at Blue Morpho, it was just, you got railroaded. There was no opportunity to figure out how to navigate that space or try things. You basically just got thrown into a riptide and you tried to survive till the end of the ceremony and then be brave enough to drink the following night. And that's one method that, you let the shamans do the change to you. And that worked. It did. With the native guides, I wasn't sucked into a riptide. I was actually disappointed my first night and a little bit of my second night because I drank the cup. They said, Sean is the liaison and founder of the native guides. Sean, I'll get back to what I was saying earlier, but Sean Chester and his wife Abigail are out in Colombia where Sean has embedded himself with the Siona and gained the trust and approval of one of the main taitas there, to where him and the community will allow him to bring guests in and give those guests access to good ceremonies, good, safe, effective ceremonies. access to good medicine. Now that takes a lot of footwork, and the program that Sean has established with the assistance of his wife is amazing in my opinion. And I am so grateful to have met him. I am so grateful to have spent the time out there. I'm grateful for the knowledge and conversations that he imparted on me. And I'm grateful that I am now able to advocate for his center and what he's doing. Now back to what I was saying, the first couple nights I felt a bit light and I was feeling disappointed because I would drink at the initial start of the ceremony and we would lay in our hammock and the lights are cut out, it's dark, it's about 10 p.m. by the time we're drinking in the jungle and we sit in silence. And that was different for me because with the Shipibo, when they sing, they kind of activate that medicine. They control your visuals, they control your emotional turmoil through the night, your experience. With you in the silence, it's just you. It's just you in the dark and the quiet, and you just wait. You wait for the medicine. And 2 hours would go by and I would feel nothing. And that's when I'm thinking, shit, I just wasted, $3,500 on the retreat, a couple grand in airline tickets, PTO request, vacation from work, bought all the supplies to go to the retreat, the clothing and the things I was needing on the packing list. Like I did a lot of things to show up here so that I could drink weak medicine. That was my initial thought. And Sean, as I was saying, had told us initially that usually 2 cups gets the jobs done. So you drink when you first start, and then a couple hours later, the ceremony opens with one of the Taitas singing the opening of the portal, which is one of their songs. And you then have another cup if you wish. You can either go up to Sean and say, hey, I'd like another cup, in which case he would coordinate with the Taita and get you another cup. Or you can coordinate with him beforehand. He might come to you at a time that he deems necessary, and he'll come to you and check in on you. Or if you seem to be having issues with the medicine, or if you're pretty immersed in the medicine, he might hold off, or he kind of tries to keep a read on everybody and decides whether to offer them another cup or not for their continuing experience through that ceremony. So that first night I had 2 cups. And I didn't feel much. It was very light visuals, which was different than Blue Morpho. I didn't even purge, and that was wild to me. I didn't even purge, and almost nothing happened. And the following morning, everyone else is sharing their experiences. There was 4 of us total, myself included, who were guests at this retreat. It's not a retreat, I gotta not use that word. With the native guides, there was 4 of us in this group for this month. And Sean's advice to me when I expressed that I was disappointed, or that I was coming in with, I was making a rookie mistake, which is to come into a plant ceremony with expectations. And I came in with expectations because I only had experience to base, I had experience at one place. Therefore, I anticipated that it was going to be like that place. That was my expectation. My expectations were not met. Therefore, I was disappointed. I did that to myself. Was it justified? Maybe. Was there a lesson involved? Yes. Now, going through that first night, to learn that 2 cups wasn't enough for me was good, because then the third night I could do 3 cups and evaluate what that did for me with this specific brew at the specific volume with the specific type of ceremony I could learn what 3 cups did for me. Visuals were even less on my second ceremony. But I did have emotional work that was done that did lead to a purge. It was a painful purge. It was a deep purge. It pertained to a relationship that I had with somebody. And after the purge, I felt physically better, not really mentally better or emotionally better. And that could have been where the music was at the time. After the first half of the ceremony, they do pick up with singing and instruments, and that does help drive the medicine and the experience. They kind of build the energy and help you move your issues through you. And after that purge, I sat at the little music area by candlelight next to Sean, and I was still struggling with that thing that I had purged. And I just had a moment. I had about an hour-long moment. An hour long where I was dealing with some heavy anger and sadness over that situation. And that was all my night was. And again in the morning, I knew that issue was going to come up because it's something that had been on my mind. That is something that I hadn't completely cleaned house with myself outside of ceremony, so I knew it was going to come up, and it did. And Sean and I talked about it, and one of the key things that came up was anger, and how he recommended the Book of Anger by Seneca to me, and how Seneca puts in perspective that anger is only bad in every way. Because I had expressed to Sean that, I'm angry about these things. If I heal, do I have to get rid of my anger? Can I keep my anger? Because anger for me has accomplished many things. I've used it as a tool. If something bothered me or did me wrong or made me feel like I had been slighted, I bring on the anger. I bring up fields of fire and rage, and I put a wall up, and I hold that fire boundary, and I protect myself, because I can be mad in every direction, and that anger will block me from grief and sadness and disappointment and frustration and heartache, all of the things that I really despise, that I don't like feeling. If I can get mad enough, I can numb all that. And that's what I want to do, because that makes things easier. Because it's easy to be mad, and I'm really good at being mad. But that's not the best course of action, because through my conversation with Sean, we discussed how anger can cause damage to other people and to yourself. It only hurts you. So one of my tasks here was to try and find other ways to deal with things besides just being angry. So that's probably going to be an ever-evolving thing for me to work on for a while. But at least, I started there. I started somewhere. Now, I still wanted to go deeper, and I still wanted to train, and I still wanted to do more with the medicine. I was finding that in this space, because it wasn't a riptide like at Blue Morpho, that it gave you the opportunity to practice tools. Because you still had autonomy in the space. You still had control over the decisions that you wanted to make. It didn't come on too fast so that you panicked and you weren't able to implement a plan. That's not the way it went. With the native guides, things were slow enough, but they did go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, but at a pace where you could stay with it, and when things got tumultuous, you could think, oh, I need to do this. Feeling nausea? Okay, practice my box breathing. Come back to breath. Slow count in, slow count out. Keep breathing. Stay with the nausea. The music picks up. Get back to your breathing. I'm thinking about uncomfortable thoughts. Okay, what about these uncomfortable thoughts? Sit with it. Breathe. Think about it. Mull it over. All night. That's what the ceremony does. With the native guides and the Colombian Yagé, it was a slow simmer, a slow boil. And what I learned was, and I anticipate that I can use this even in more aggressive ceremonies now, is that what's going to happen is you'll be served your cup. They'll either sing or they won't sing, depending on where you're at. Visuals, if visuals come on, if they're overwhelming, try to understand that they're just visuals. It's like a movie. It's just something to watch. It doesn't necessarily have to mean anything, though it can correlate to what you're feeling. But it's not going to hurt you. If you can just look at it like a movie, then you can just see it for what it is. They're just visuals. And you don't have to be frightened of them. They don't have to be scary. You can change them if you want by just thinking of something else. Or opening your eyes. Try to just don't pay them no mind. Or just, if you don't like what the plant's giving you, just realize that it's going to pass. Because the visuals never stay the same. So it's going to evolve into something else. So just hold off. Be patient. With the nausea, because ayahuasca is a purgative, it will make you puke or shit yourself. That buildup is slow. And you have to become aware of your body and pay attention to the energy that is climbing inside of yourself. That, the flutter in your stomach, the rapid heartbeat, that's when you have to be able to practice breath. You have to be able to keep pace with your breath, keep paying attention to your breath, don't become distracted. Counting helps. Slow counting. Do that all night. If your ceremony is 6 hours long and you're slow counting 4-count box breaths for 6 hours through intense nausea and uncomfortable visuals and emotional turmoil, you can understand how that would be a challenge, but that is what you're there to work on. That's the whole point. It's not supposed to be easy. It's a very difficult thing to do, but if you can do it, the amount of work that gets done is incomparable to anything else. And that's what I wanted to do, was this was an opportunity to train. So I was able to do that. But what I also learned was that when it will get to a point where the shaman or the taita or the ayahuasquero, the maestro, whatever the leader is of this ceremony, is, if they know what they're doing, is going to build with music you and everyone else who's drank the purgative to a point where you're going to erupt, unless you have done extensive training to the point where you can really keep it together and you know how to hold that brew down. You're going to pop at some point. And here's the thing, that's okay. You're getting out a bunch of shit that doesn't need to be in there. But try not to pop so early so that you don't waste your cup. If you drink, your initial cup of ayahuasca or your second or third during ceremony, and you end up vomiting that cup, within 5 minutes, well, now you've spit out all that medicine before it had a time to digest. So you've essentially wasted that cup. You can either take that as the medicine decided that you didn't need that cup and it got it out of you, or you can put it on yourself and say, I missed an opportunity because I didn't try that hard, or I wasn't ready for this. I'll try again next time, and you keep at it. But you try to keep each cup down as long as possible so that you can allow the medicine to marinate and sit within you to do as much work as it can. You get the most out of every cup before you inevitably lose that purging battle. And what you'll also find is when you do purge, it will be the deepest purge of your life. I promise you have never puked harder from the fucking bottom of your soul, from the fucking tendons in your feet. My ribs felt like they were gonna snap out of my spine from how hard I was contorting to vomit these cups. You can't even process thought because of how hard you are forcing your body is vacuum sealing itself to get this out of you. And it's a battle. It's a fucking spiritual battle because you're in a different headspace and your body's really going through it. And the shamans they're driving the whole thing. It's almost timed. Everyone pops almost asynchronously. I'm fucking that word up. Everyone pops at the same time because the shamans know how to build the energy in the room to the point where people can't take it. But when you get it out, the euphoric relief that you will feel is worth it. And the shamans also know, the taitas or the ayahuasca getters, whatever, they know that after you get that out, they hear it, obviously. You're retching to high hell. And when you're done, they bring you back down with music. And you can just feel the jungle air and the amount of extra oxygen that is now available to you and the resting that your body does when it sinks back into itself after you've just expelled all of this traumatic bile. And they lull you into euphoric states. It's an up and down. The ceremonies are like this. There's really heavy highs and then super deep lows and then some mids, and it's just the whole night is an experience. And my third night, my plan was 4 cups. I told Sean, that when I was at Blue Morpho, I was almost scared to take another cup. There were only 3 nights where I made it to 2 cups, and I was fucking terrified because I knew how extra chaotic it could get when you pour more fuel on the fire in those specific ceremonies. But with the native guides, because it wasn't that intense, it was easier to traverse. It gave me the confidence to be able to say yes to another cup, which allowed me to then go deeper, to do more work, which I found to be very effective. And I didn't make it to 4 cups because the last ceremony, I felt, for whatever reason, there was more oomph behind it. There was more emphatic energy from the taitas and the musicians helping the taitas. For whatever reason, that was just my experience. And I lost track of my headspace somewhere after the 2nd cup. And when I had my 3rd, I didn't know if that was my 3rd or my 4th. I was completely disoriented, but not in necessarily a bad way. I was just kind of less aware of this tangible reality. And I had a couple, deep purges and a lot of good moments in my hammock that were positive. And towards the end of the night, I thought I had 4 because the initial plan was I'm going to tell Sean that I need 4 and he's going to approach me every time he thinks I need a cup, and that was the game plan. But throughout the night, he had assessed and determined that I was so immersed well enough in the medicine that he didn't think it was necessary for me to have a 4th cup, and that he thought that if I wanted that 4th cup, I would approach him. But I never did because I was waiting on him to approach me. So it was kind of a miscommunication, but his assessment was that I was doing well in that ceremony, and he didn't want to throw that off. So I had 3. But it was still a very powerful, deep spiritual experience that I shared with the other 3 guys in that group. I could hear them going through it. I'm sure they could hear me going through it. And the experience is beyond words, obviously. I can talk about the extremities, the how, you know, the Maloka is set up. You know, they're still building it in progress, so there's only like half walls. The floor is still partially dirt, except for where the Taita's table is. Sean has his medicine table. The Taita has his. There's a small table they set up, you know, towards the end of the night where they do ceremony, light a candle, and they play music around it. You know, the bathrooms are back behind the Maloka. There's 3 stalls. They don't flush, so you pour water in it to create the vacuum to make it flush if you have to go to the bathroom. I can talk about those things. How we're in hammocks, we're not on mats, we're not on chairs. You know, how they share mambe and ambule, and we smoke tobacco together, and there's rape. I can talk about those things. What there's no way that I can describe is what was going on in my head. I can't explain the divine experiences. I can't explain what spiritual, you know, every moment by moment, the metaphors the medicine was giving me. I can't explain most of that. If I did, it'd be so over detailed and pointless. So that was my experience with the native guides. Now, the native guides is not a retreat center. Blue Morpho is a retreat center. Solterra is a retreat center. Spirit Quest is closer to a retreat center, where there is a large facility, there is a permanent facility, there is a large staff. There is the capacity to hold many guests. Those are retreat centers, where things are very nice for you. The Native Guides is not that. The Native Guides is Sean's home. That's where he lives. You go to his house to stay with him and his wife, where on the nights of ceremony they will drive you to the Maloka of the community of the Siona to partake in ceremony under his roof, where that is the Taita's job. That's where he earns his income. That's his spot in that tribal community. You just happen to be a guest because Sean has created a system where the Taita allows him to bring people in to partake in these ceremonies, where community members may or may not be there on the night that you and the other guests are there as well for medicine, because that's what that place is for. It's not reserved for you or anybody else who pays a couple grand to come hang out with Sean and do ayahuasca. You're there under the approval of that community Taita. It's not a retreat center. But Sean has set up a really good program to allow people to come down there and do real work. And Sean is a very humble man. He won't talk himself up, so I will talk him up a little bit. Sean is a fucking soldier. He is devout to what he's doing. He takes what he's doing very seriously. What he's doing right now is his life. He brings in guests almost on a consistent monthly basis, and he drinks with us every single time. You know, just because we go in, we have 3 great, mind-altering, profound, life-changing experiences, and then we go home feeling all fluffy and changed and blessed. He's still there. He's drinking tonight. He's gonna drink a couple nights from now. With or without guests that fly in to train or to experience this with him, he's there doing work continuously. And when he's not with this tribe, he's going deeper into the jungle to work with another tribe. And they do even deeper ayahuasca retreats. They do deeper training, deeper sessions. And Sean goes there to hone himself. He's doing work so that he can be the best version of himself, to continue being a tool that is best suited per him for God, because he feels that he should, pay it forward, help people, fucking spearhead evil shit, the darkness, whatever you want to call it. He's trying to do the most amount good by putting himself through rigorous training, you know, just for a greater purpose, because he feels like he should do that. And even in the midst of ceremony, when we're getting our asses kicked and he's right there with us drinking, he's also escorting us to the bathrooms because we can't walk straight. He is checking in on us all throughout the night. He is taking directions from the taita and coordinating with everyone else in the room. He is also, you know, picking up our puke bowls. He's puking over the side of the Maloka, but then squaring himself away and coming to help us. Like, Sean's a goddamn soldier. And he's also extremely nice. And if I had to throw a word on him, I would say mentor. Because you have to think not only what he did with me, but what he did with everyone else. He brings people in, they have a problem. He walks them through their problems, sits them down on the days in between ceremony, hashes out their problem, helps them establish a plan to go into the following ceremony. He does this continuously. He is guiding people from all over the earth through a very difficult and unique spiritual psychedelic intervention. He's doing that on a constant basis. He does it very professionally. He's very tight about his template and his practice. And I admire the work and the dedication and his fucking capacity to do what he does. That he is a fucking special, very unique human being. So, if he's watching this or listening to this, that's probably so much praise that it makes him want to vomit, so I'll stop. The off days there, you have 3 ceremonies. I believe we were there for, it was either 8 or 10 days with or without the travel. But on the off days, he would usually take people down to like the river right at the foot of their home at the bottom of the hill, but it rained so much that we didn't get the opportunity to do that because the water was just so out of control. It wouldn't be safe. But a lot of the time we spent partaking in medicine together on off days. You know, they had really good food. Sean does have a lovely helper named Sophia. She made amazing food for us every single day. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Except on ceremony nights, there was no dinner, obviously. But it was always really clean. There was no meat, except for on non-ceremony days, we were given chicken. There were eggs. It was phenomenal food. It was really delicious. It was all extremely clean. He sources it because not everything out there is as healthy as you would think it's. Not everyone's just picking from the jungle. So a lot of stuff is still imported and has a bunch of crap on it. So he sources all the food that he feeds to his guests, and it's all cooked really well. So that was great. Let's see here. No, I'm gonna change topics and kind of discuss, like, you know, I create these videos and I try to bring attention to what these things are. There's a lot of medicines out there besides just ayahuasca. And the topic I want to cover here is people doing all the plants for clouts or badges. For clout or badges. What I mean by that is, in the spiritual community or the plant medicine ceremony, you know, use this as an example that I can just rattle these off. Peyote, Wachuma, or San Pedro, ayahuasca, ketamine, mushrooms, fucking iboga, 5-MeO, Kent combo, which is not a psychedelic, but it's on the list. Now, all these things are experiences that you travel somewhere and you go to some special shaman, some leader, and you partake in and you gain, you know, your little slice of enlightenment. And this culture, what it has done is there are people who treat them like, it's like a punch card. Like, oh, have you done ayahuasca? I've done ayahuasca. Have you done peyote? Oh, I've done peyote. And it's almost like people are skipping over the purpose and the lessons of the medicines, and they're just going to do these medicines just for the sake of saying that they've done all the medicines. And I can see how it would be perceived that that's what I'm doing. And maybe when I started, I looked at it that way. But how I see it is every single one of these medicines is so different. And it changes you in a certain kind of way. Or it'll show you something so unique that is different than all the other medicines. And I can only imagine that if you've sat with 10 different professors over 10 very arduous courses, that you would come out the other side with a very broad perspective on things. And that's why I'm not streamlining myself or specifically adhering to only doing one kind of medicine over and over and over. I want to sit with every teacher possible in every different way possible that is, that is realistic, so that I can see what all there is to see, for the most part, realistically, and to then have the tool bag for when any person comes to me and they say, hey, I have this thing I'm working on, I'm thinking about trying this or that, what should I do? I now have an arsenal to pick from and say, well, I've done 30 different things pertaining to your topic. I think plan A16 is perfect for you. It's helpful for me to do all these things. One, to do the work on myself, but two, to be able to push people in the right direction. And that's actually something that I want to touch on called the handoff, which is a topic that Aubrey Marcus and Sean Chester discussed in one of the podcast episodes that I will share a link to in this video. The handoff, how they describe it, is when, because I once upon a time watched a Joe Rogan episode with his friend Aubrey Marcus, and Aubrey Marcus talked about ayahuasca, I then ended up at a retreat doing ayahuasca, where I then met Hamilton Souther. Hamilton Souther had his own life, where he stumbled onto ayahuasca, changed him, and now he's dedicated his life to learning that practice and helping other people heal. Hamilton helped me heal. He handed me off, on the path of learning and healing in another direction. Then I watch Aubrey's podcast with Sean Chester on it. And they discuss Yagé and the native guides. And it hits me, like, that sounds interesting. I should go do that. Okay, so I go do that. Sean, might have gotten a handoff from Aubrey. Aubrey might have said, hey, you should go do this. So Sean's like, oh, okay, I'll go do that. Then Sean does that. It changes him radically. To which Sean starts a center and brings people in to where they have an experience that changes them radically, like me. To where then I go and I meet somebody and they're like, hey, where should I go? And I say, oh, you should go to the Native Guides, or you should go to Blue Morpho to see Hamilton. That's a handoff. Now, the concept of the handoff is everyone's doing their part to push good things out into the world. Person A does something that causes B to do something, that causes person C to do something, that causes person D to do something. It's a handoff. Because person Z would have never been or ended up in the place where they were at doing a good thing had person A never started that domino effect. That's the handoff. Now, I wish I knew how, when I hear some people talk about, I've done 200 ceremonies. I have no idea how people are doing this, because I've had 8 specifically ayahuasca ceremonies, and to go to each of those places cost me around $4,000 to $5,000 each time is not easily accessible. I save my money and my PTO all year long to make sure that I can go do these things. When people say, like, I don't have the money, I don't know what to say to them because I don't have the money. I max out my credit cards and then try to, make more money to pay those off so that I can go do these things. I don't go blow my money anywhere else, really, so that I can go do these things. They are very expensive, but they are beyond worth it. They're worth every penny. It is a drop in the bucket, in my opinion, to sit in front of God and change your fucking life. But when people say that, they've sat for 200 ceremonies, because there are people in this community that talk like that. Aside from they're getting their shit from some person in the States who shouldn't be serving the medicine, he's just brewing his own in his kitchen, and every fucking Saturday they go and sit in circle and have their little drinking session in his living room to a playlist that he's got on Spotify. That's not the medicine. And I know some people are going to get touchy about that, but in my personal biased opinion, if you want the real, truest medicine, you need to go to the source where that's all they do. That Taita that I worked with at the Native Guides with Sean, that is all he does. His whole life, 64 years old, multiple times per week for his whole existence is the medicine. He's not deviating. He's not doing other shit on the side. That's all he knows. He's a fucking surgeon for your soul. I want that guy. I don't want Sean in New York, or I'll pick a different name. I don't want Jason in New York who read a book on ayahuasca and learned from his friend how to cook it. And now he just has his friends over and they throw on, shaman music and sit through the night and have crazy experiences. That's not medicine to me. I don't stand beside that, because if shit does go south, they're not prepared to fix or unfuck the problems that they could potentially spill onto some people. So I don't advise anyone to ever partake in ceremonies like that. I would never myself partake in ceremonies like that. That's not medicine. I do want to swap topics again, though. Another thing that happens in this community is people cling to their traumas and their problems because it becomes the story of their identity, and they either intentionally do not let go of that story, or they don't know how to let go of that story. And so their experience in the medicine is to continuously relive that story. It becomes, even with people who are not on psychedelics or doing plant medicine ceremonies, people that meditate and they treat their trauma in whatever way they want to do. Trauma, even the word has been overused and hijacked in the community of quote unquote healing people. It's like trendy to be traumatic now, trendy to be to have trauma. Everyone wants to have trauma so that they have a story of what they're healing, so that they can partake in the healing, because that's what the community is doing. And if you're not healing, well, then what are you doing? And people get caught up in this. Obviously, everybody has something to work on. And when you first start, obviously, if you have some kind of trauma, that trauma will be addressed. And it may take more than a few ceremonies. But it should not be your every ceremony, your all existence, every single time. If you are rehashing the same trauma and same problem every single night for 20 ceremonies, you're not healing. You are obsessed with the idea of healing while you are simultaneously clinging or holding on to your problems. You're not going anywhere. You're spinning your wheels. You are a hamster, in the running cage. Because you can only ascend through the medicine into divine experiences that are beautiful and not horrific and tragic, if you can get past your human experienced trauma, we all share similar problems. Heavy as they may be, somebody else has a similar story. There's no problem that the plant medicines have not seen. You go in, you address those issues. Those can be your preliminary ceremonies. However many it takes, obviously, if it takes you fucking 7 to get it all out, then it takes you 7. But it shouldn't take 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 to deal with one problem. Once you've dealt with your hurdles, those hurdles are not as apt to impede or come about in your ceremonies anymore. And once you are past those problems, you now have the opportunity to explore. You have the opportunity to ask other questions, to try different things. You're not so caught up in treating that ailment anymore. And that goes for outside of ceremony as well. If your whole life, every single day, you are caught up in thinking about the one thing that causes you problems, you're not dealing with it. You're just obsessing over it. And I say that because I think it's unfortunate that some people get caught up in that, and I would advise people to maybe take a moment to consider or think about if they are doing that. And if you are, take note of it. If you think that sounds stupid, then apply what I just said and figure out a way to treat the source of your problem, either by yourself or with the assistance of medicines. Get it dealt with, and then leave it behind you. Don't keep carrying it with you, because you're not going to go anywhere if that's all you do. Don't make your trauma your life. And like I already said earlier, there are a lot of shitty centers out there. It's not just people in their basement or in their living room, but there are also retreat centers who are popping up, slapping a trendy name on their billboard that's very spiritual looking, and saying flowers of Gaia, or the healing soul of the light. They'll hijack something that sounds like that, and it's just a facade for a place that wants to draw in a bunch of people, pour them some medicine, quote unquote, some brew that they made, and charge you a couple grand. And they just do that to people to make a business out of it. There's a lot of those centers, and I don't point people in the directions of those centers. You only should want to go to centers that are very well established, that are long-standing, and you should be able to track the lineage of the facilitators of those centers, and they should be transparent with you about how extensive their background is, and you should compare that to other centers, and you should go to the number one place. Don't settle when you're undergoing any kind of surgery, especially a spiritual one. Don't fall into the trap of getting caught up in a shitty retreat center. To keep this video just under an hour, I will post the links in the bottom of this video to the Native Guides website, so you can check them out. I will post their YouTube. They have a trailer. Again, Abigail, Sean's wife, does a really good job of promoting and video editing, and just kind of giving people a brief insight onto what to expect, what it kind of looks like, without going too deep into ceremonies themselves. But she does a really good job of advertising for the Native Guides. And I will also include the links to the 2 podcasts that Sean was on with Aubrey that initially led me to him, so that if you have questions about who he is and who his story, what his story is, you can go check that out. I'll include those. I'm posting this on my YouTube, but if you're already here, you can also find me on Instagram at Eris_Corinthian. That's AERIS_CORINTHIAN. Or I'm also on TikTok, where I make psychedelic related parodies, short skits, just humor and education on my TikTok. And that's Aeris_Mourn, AERIS_MOURN. And that's all I got. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. See ya.